Welcome back to the deep dive. I gotta say, every time I think we've, covered all the bases on autism, you send over a new batch of research, and I'm just blown away. Like today's topic, definitely not one I saw coming.
Well, that's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right?
Yeah.
Always something new to uncover.
Yeah.
So what's piqued your curiosity this time?
This time, we're going deep on this possible link between autism and, get this, jaundice.
Oh, wow. Okay, now that's an unexpected connection. You don't hear about that every day.
Right. And we've covered a lot of ground on autism, potential causes, therapies, the works. But when I saw this jaundice connection pop up in your research, I knew we had to unpack that.
Absolutely. It's definitely worth exploring.
So before we get into the why of this link, let's start with the basics. For anyone listening who might not be familiar, could you give us a quick explainer? What exactly is jaundice?
Yeah, you're right. It's one of those things where you might assume everyone knows, but it's worth a quick definition. So jaundice itself is actually a symptom. It's that yellowing of the skin and eyes, and it happens when there's too much bilirubin in the bloodstream.
Bilirubin. Okay, for a second there, I thought we were about to start talking about, like, rare minerals or something.
Ah, not quite. Bilirubin is basically a yellow pigment, a natural byproduct of red blood cells breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
Usually our bodies filter it out no problem, but sometimes, like in newborns, the liver isn't quite up to speed yet. And that bilirubin can build up, which is when you start to see that yellow tinge.
Okay, so we've got this common condition, especially in newborns, but where does autism enter the picture? What's the connection your research found?
Here's where it gets really interesting. A number of studies have found a statistical link between babies who had jaundice, especially severe cases, or if it wasn't treated quickly enough, and a slightly higher chance of being diagnosed with autism later on.
Hold on. So does this mean that if a baby has jaundice, they will develop autism later? Because I know some parents listening might be concerned about that.
That's so important to clarify. We are not saying that at all. Just because there's a statistical link, a correlation, it doesn't mean one thing directly causes the other. It just means there's a potential relationship there that needs more research.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's dive into that a bit more. What are the leading theories on why this link might exist? What are researchers looking at?
Well, there are three main avenues of thought. The first is all about the impact jaundice might have on brain development, especially if it's severe or lasts a long time. Basically, researchers are looking at whether high bilirubin levels, if they're not taken care of, could interfere with how the brain develops in those very early stages of life.
So it's not just about clearing up the yellow coloring, it's about making sure the brain has what it needs to develop properly during a critical time.
Exactly. And this actually connects to the second theory, which is about shared genetic factors. It could be that certain genes make a baby more likely to have both jaundice and autism, not that one causes the other directly. It's like they might share a common root.
A 2-for-1 gene deal, and not in a good way. What about that third avenue you mentioned?
This one gets a little more complicated because it's about potential environmental factors.
Mhm.
Things like if a baby is born prematurely or if the mother has an infection during pregnancy. These factors can increase the risk of both jaundice and autism separately.
So it could be that something happens in the womb, or even during birth, that sets the stage for both conditions, rather than one directly leading to the other.
That's another possibility researchers are investigating. And to really understand these theories, I think those statistics you found are really relevant here.
Yeah, let's get those numbers out there because honestly, even I was kind of shocked by what I was reading. We're talking about a huge percentage of newborns experiencing jaundice to some degree, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The American Academy of Pediatrics, their data says that something like 60% of full-term babies, and get this, a whopping 80% of premature babies, will have some level of jaundice in their first week of life.
80%, that's incredibly common. And then you compare that to those CDC stats on autism, which say about 1 in 36 kids are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and it really makes you wonder, is there some serious overlap happening between those groups?
That is the million-dollar question. We can't say for sure based on the research so far, but it definitely highlights why we need more investigation in this area.
Absolutely. So given all this, what does this mean for our listeners, even those who aren't parents?
Well, it means we're all on this journey of understanding together,
Yeah.
right? Even if we don't have kids or haven't experienced jaundice firsthand, knowing about this possible link, this correlation, as we've been saying, it can help raise awareness. And who knows, it might even spark some really important conversations.
Right, like with our own doctors, maybe, or even just with friends and family who are having babies.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right? The more we know, the more we can support each other, ask informed questions, and advocate for more research.
I love that knowledge creating this ripple effect. So it's not about panicking at the first sign of a yellow tinge, but about being informed.
Exactly. Early detection and treatment for jaundice are so crucial. And it's not just about clearing up that yellowing. It could have implications down the road, too.
And this goes back to that first theory we talked about, the impact of high bilirubin on early brain development. It really makes you think about how delicate that whole process is.
Absolutely. There's still so much we're learning about how those early experiences can shape the developing brain.
It's fascinating, but it can also feel a bit overwhelming, right? Like, how do we wrap our heads around all the different factors that could be at play here?
Oh, I hear you. It's definitely complex, but I think that's what makes this kind of research so important. The more we understand, the better we can support individuals with autism and their families.
Okay, so bringing it back to our listeners, what are some actionable takeaways here? What can they do, even if they're not directly affected by autism?
Well, honestly, engaging with research like this, having these conversations, that's huge. The fact that you chose to cover this in your deep dive tells me your listeners are already ahead of the curve. They're curious, they want to learn, and that's so important.
Ah, well, that's good to hear. But beyond simply learning, are there other things our listeners can do to make a difference?
Absolutely. Staying informed is key. There are amazing organizations doing groundbreaking work in autism research and advocacy. Supporting them, whether it's donating, volunteering, or even just spreading the word, can make a real difference.
Such a good point. And that ties back to what you said earlier about knowledge being power. The more we know, the more we can make a difference.
Exactly. It's not just about awareness anymore, it's about action. And this deep dive is a perfect example of that.
You know, it really feels like we've moved beyond simply acknowledging autism. We're pulling back the curtain, looking at genetics, environment, even something like jaundice. It's like we're finally getting a glimpse of the bigger picture.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It really does feel like we're on the verge of some major breakthroughs in autism research. It's an exciting time to be paying attention.
You know, as you're talking, it makes me think about this other thing, like a question I haven't been able to shake.
Oh, I know that feeling. What's got you thinking?
Well, it's this idea of how common jaundice is, right? We've been saying it all episode. It's incredibly prevalent, especially with newborns.
Right, definitely something like a majority of newborns experience it to some degree.
Exactly. So this might sound like a stretch, but could it be that this seemingly small thing, this common condition, is actually part of the reason we're seeing more autism diagnoses? Or is that too much of a leap?
It's a really interesting question, and honestly, it's something researchers are trying to figure out right now. Like we've been saying, it's probably not just one thing, right? It's this complex web of genetics, environment, maybe even things like jaundice, all playing a role.
So we're still piecing together the puzzle, it sounds like.
Exactly. But that's what makes this kind of research so important. Every study, every discovery brings us a step closer to understanding the bigger picture. Who knows? Maybe someday we'll look back and realize this small thing, this common condition we thought we had figured out, actually held a key to understanding autism in a whole new light.
It's like they say, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. But that's what makes it so exciting. There's always more to discover.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm-hmm.
This field is bursting with potential, and I can't wait to see what we uncover next.
Well, on that note of endless possibility and a whole lot left to explore, I think we'll have to wrap up this deep dive for today.
Always a pleasure diving in with you.
The feeling is mutual. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of autism research. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic guaranteed to make you think. Until then, keep those questions coming.